All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ellen Lafferty, and I'm the chairperson of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area, Brighton Howell unit. I welcome you to tonight's online forum featuring candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives in the 8th Congressional District. The candidates will be on the ballot of the 2020 primary election on Tuesday, August 4th. The views expressed tonight are those of the candidates and not of the League of Women Voters or our co-sponsors this evening. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating 100 years in expanding voter rights, educating voters, and shaping and influencing legislation at the local, state, and national level. We are pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan, civic, and political organization that encourages informed and active participation of all citizens in government. We work to increase understanding of major public policy issues and seek to strengthen and broaden knowledge about our form of government and democracy. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stand on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls. Therefore, we bring you tonight's program. It is my pleasure to introduce our moderator for tonight, John King of WHMI, who will explain tonight's format and get us started. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. And good evening to all of our candidates. The forum today will have the following format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute. Each candidate will have a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I will ask questions which come from the Livingston County community, a panel made up of the League of Women Voters, as well as WHMI and the Livingston Post. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond to a question. At appropriate times, the timer will hold up their card with the amount of time remaining, and then finally, a stop sign. Candidates, please do stop when indicated, so everybody has an equal opportunity to participate. The order of who speaks first, second, and so on will be alphabetical, and the initial responder will be rotated such that each candidate will have the opportunity to be first to answer a question. So number one gets the first opening statement and also the first closing statement. The rationale behind this is that the first person should not be able to make the first impression and the last impression. It's my honor now to introduce three of the candidates for the 8th District GOP congressional race: Alan Hoover, Paul Young, and Christina Like. We're ready for your opening statement, Alan Hoover. Mr. Hoover, are you ready for your opening statement?
Yes, I am. Okay, you dropped your tone on that when you said the person's name. I didn't catch that. Okay, all right, good to go. Hello, everybody. This is Alan Hoover. I'm the Marine Corps Gunnery Sergeant at Ortonville that's running for Congress. Spent 20 years in the United States Marine Corps, did 5 deployments, combat support, 19 operations globally. Grew up in 16 different cities across the state of Michigan. Been a Michigan resident my entire life. The only time I was ever out of the state of Michigan is when I was away for military duty or when I was at war. Speaking of war, we are looking at the climate of the United States that we're in right now with these atmospherics. Our country is definitely being attacked. We have psychological warfare. We have technological warfare. We have economical warfare going on. We have seen these plagues come into our country and try to put us into a position of isolation, try to take away our constitutional rights. We need to send people to Congress.
Okay,
that's it.
Thank you. We'll move on to Paul Young, your opening statement.
Thank you, John. My name is Paul Young, and I am running for Congress here in Michigan's 8th District. And for those that I'm introducing myself to, perhaps I should spell my name. While I pronounce it Young, I spell it Junge. And this is a short intro, so I also might invite people to go to my website where they can find more information about me. My website is my name, PAULJUNGE.com. There's some more information about my background and about different policy stances I'm taking. As I've been campaigning in Ingham County and Livingston County and Oakland County, been talking with voters and hearing their concerns that range from, the health issues related to the coronavirus, the economic disruption that the shutdowns have caused with people being kicked out of their jobs, with businesses being displaced and ruined. And I see the 15-second warning, so I'll just note very quickly, too, of course, as Alan mentioned, not just the protests, which of course are justified, but the riots that are not, when all Americans recognize that the killing of George Floyd was not justified. Yeah. Those are just some of the issues that we're addressing.
Thank you. We'll move on to Christina Light, your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you for having us here tonight and hosting this forum. I grew up in Pinckney, and my father was a gun dealer, and he taught me the Second Amendment, so I'm very honored of that. My mother taught me my faith, and she also taught me the First Amendment through our faith. As a career litigator who has always lived in this district, worked here, and served in this district, I've been fighting for this community my entire life. Whether I was at age 19 in the village trustee, as a village trustee who received a raise for the police, whether representing a child who had her Trump pin forcibly removed at school, a veteran returning home from defending our country, a victim of domestic violence, or someone who just needed a second chance. I have always been there, and I've always fought for them, and I stood up for them. And now I want to go to Congress to fight for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, candidates, on to the questions. As a reminder, I will be reading the questions once, and they will not be repeated unless requested. Our first question: what is your assessment of Michigan's response to the coronavirus pandemic, and what, if anything, would you have done differently? And Alan Hoover, you will answer first.
All right, so first of all, shutting down the economy, shutting down all these small businesses, absolutely not the way to go. Look, I spent 20 years in the United States Marine Corps. I went through NBC, nuclear, biological, and chemical training. If this was a biological pandemic at the statute and at the level that we are being told and made to believe that it is, you would see Marines, you would see National Guardsmen, you would see airmen, you would see the DOD personnel wearing NBC suits, okay, not walking around in N95, 1860 surgical grade masks. We would have our chemical warfare suits on, we would have biological suits on, okay, if that is exactly what it was. And additionally, these cloth masks that we're using, they don't even work to protect you from this virus. Look, I own a corporation, all right? My business is called R2C2 Global, all right? I've had this company since 2012. Go ahead and look it up, r2c2global.com. My business, when this came out, this pandemic came out, we heavily got involved to try and put Michigan back on the map so we could open businesses, small businesses back up in the state of Michigan. We identified test kits that we could have sold to the state at a very competitive price so we could have opened this whole state up. Government didn't want them though. Government didn't want our test kits. So at the end of the day, it's not what it was that we're being presented with it is. Because if it truly was, we could have had everybody in the state tested, relatively inexpensive, especially compared to the billions of dollars that went through on the CARES Act. All right. Additionally, I wouldn't have shut down the businesses. I wouldn't have pulled everybody out of school. Okay. You in the United States have your freedoms. You have your freedoms as an American citizen.
We're out of time. Mr. Young, your answer.
You know, I think in any type of emerging health emergency, there's going to be a lot of unknowns. And I think and we see this, I think, from the American people, some forgiveness to our leaders that they're going to make mistakes and that they have to make judgments in real time. So the invitation in your question, John, to what might I have done different? In many ways, I don't want to second guess any of our leaders that had to make decisions that they made. And so I'm going to reference, some observations that I was making to people in real time. I think, of course, we all recognize that the way China handled it, where they were deceiving people and not letting the World Health Organization, others know what was happening, that added to the difficulties of the pandemic for countries around the world. And we all can remember back in March when it was very frightening and we were worried that hospital systems could be overrun. And we all banded together, I think, to flatten the curve and make sure that hospitals wouldn't be overrun, that ventilators wouldn't be in such short supply. And it's really just incredibly encouraging to see the response of the American people, of companies that have changed their manufacturing lines to produce personal protective gear and ventilators and so many other things that we needed. And it's a wake-up call for us, I think, when it comes to China, that we just cannot allow ourselves to be vulnerable to them with medicines and all the rest. Boy, 90 seconds does go by quickly. I can just say that it's a continuing problem. We need to continue to address it. And while there absolutely were mistakes, including particularly with what happened in nursing homes, it's always a difficult issue.
All right, and Christina Like, your answer.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say that China was very deceptive in this whole situation. In fact, we need to stop manufacturing drugs over in China, and we need to stop manufacturing drugs anywhere that's not an ally of the United States of America. The second thing is what I would have done differently as a congresswoman. I would have actually showed up a little sooner for the American public. The American people needed their public servants being there for them, and they weren't there when the American people needed them. However, I am for this. During the whole COVID situation and during the shutdown, I've always stated this: I am for the safety for the people. I have a concern for the safety. I have been concerned for the economy, and I also have concern for the constitutional infringements. As to keeping the economy open, though, we could have done something a little bit different. We could have actually kept the economy open and had thermal scanners into the businesses and make sure that people felt safe when they came into the business. And that would actually kept the economy open during that time period and also protected the community outside. So we could have kept some of the businesses open. Obviously, nobody knew what was going on and what could have happened, but we need to make sure that we are not dependent on China any longer. And I believe that COVID has really taught us, American citizens and congressional people, that.
All right.
In
We'll
90
move
seconds.
on to our second question. Security experts warn about foreign interference in the upcoming U.S. elections through cyber attacks, social media, and other means to spread disinformation and foment agitation. Some worry foreign interests could interfere in the voting process by accessing voter rolls and ballots. What can Congress do to prevent foreign interference and preserve the integrity of our elections? And Paul Young, you'll be the first to answer.
Well, of course, the main function of Congress is to pass laws, and hopefully Congress has passed laws to empower local election officials to do everything they can to protect their voter rolls. Whatever the Department of Homeland Security can do to support secretaries of state and other election officials throughout the country. But, I think it's becoming obvious as we see the agitation and the attempts to tear down statues and try to erase our past, that there are not just foreign threats, which of course we need to guard against, but there are domestic threats as well. And when we are allowing groups to just, as I've already said, tear down statues, it's an indication that so much is at risk, and that fear that gets created by that can impact people's willingness to come out to the polls. And so I urge not just local election officials, but local law enforcement officials and the political leaders that run those communities to insist that they have to maintain order in those places so that people can feel safe to come out and exercise their political points of view and to vote. So it's not just foreign interference, it's also interference that can happen right here in this country. And there's so much more to say on that. But again, I see the 15-second limit. So I encourage all local election officials to protect the integrity of the voting system.
Okay, thank you. Christina Like.
Thank you. The right to vote is a fundamental right, and we need to protect that right. There are people that are dying to actually go out and vote in other countries, and absolutely we need to protect that right to vote. A lot of individuals are wanting to mail out ballots, and I don't believe that's an answer because that's going to create a lot of fraud. And the problem with that is because we don't have the chain of custody. Where's the chain of custody? When I look at it as an attorney, we always look at where's the chain of custody for the evidence. And where are the ballots coming to? Is Russia going to collect the ballots? Who's collecting the ballots? We saw a lot of fraud going on in just the 2016 election. And that was when we saw like ballots piled up in garbage. We saw ballots piled up in the schools. So we have to make sure that we protect the integrity. And when we do that, we need to make sure that we have a safety net. Like when we go to vote, we need to make sure it's safe for people, especially because of the COVID situation. So we need to make sure that we have a 6 feet distance and make sure that we follow what we've been told for the last 3 months about having 6 foot distance and making sure that it's clean, sterile for individuals to have that right to vote. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And Alan Hoover.
Okay, so when we send our troops to other countries to bring democracy to those countries, and they have a vote for the first time in their country, what do we see? Do we see the military mailing out absentee ballots for the people in these countries for the first time to take part in a democratic election to then fill out and send back in to this new established democratic government that they have? No, absolutely not. We set up polling stations and these people come in and they vote in person because that is how important it is for you to go in and do your actual vote in person. You have a civic duty, a civic responsibility to be an American citizen. To whom much is given, much is required. You have been given an abundant amount of freedom, more freedom in the United States than in any other country on this planet. It is your responsibility, your God-given right and responsibility to stand up for your civic duty. You have to go to the polls and vote. You have to. Now, if for some reason that they force this upon us, there are ways that they can do it. The NSA, for example, has a brute force encrypted system. Okay, you could send your vote in and then they could have it set up so that you could go into an encrypted system with your login and verify that the vote that was recorded was the vote that you made in the first place. That's all I have on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Move on to our next question. More than 32 million Americans have lost their jobs in just the first 3 months of this year. And as of April, Michigan had nearly 23% unemployment. All of this economic wreckage will cause Michigan to have a projected $3.2 billion budget deficit. What could Congress have done differently to help businesses and individuals during the pandemic? And Christina Leik, you will go first.
Well, I'm going to, again, talk about China. And China is a big crux to this. China has been deceptive. It's not the people of China, but it's the government. And about 4 years ago, we saw that China was sending us dog food that was poison. It was actually killing our dogs. And that's very personal to me because I have a dog. We need to be careful because they don't have the standards there. So we need to stop being dependent upon China and make sure that we do not have the manufacturing of drugs in China any longer. When they said that they were going to stop sending us vital drugs to American lives, that was completely wrong. And we are not going to tolerate it. And I will not tolerate it as a congresswoman. We need to make sure that the American life is protected. Sorry, go ahead, John.
That's okay. I'm sorry. My apologies. I thought you were done.
That's all right.
All right. Mr. Hoover.
Okay, good to go. Look, first, who are the three largest manufacturers for medical equipment in the world? China, Italy, and the United States. What were the three countries that get hit with this pandemic and with the largest scale when it happened? China, Italy, and the United States. I don't think that happened by coincidence. Okay, so again, going back to what I was saying there before. Additionally, with the unemployment piece that we have now, look, if you're an American citizen and you work on a job, you have unemployment insurance. You pay into it. You pay into it. So if you lose your job, then you have unemployment insurance to cover you for up to 26 weeks or whatever it is. So with that, we had that piece. Additionally, with the CARES Act, when our government, with our Congress, issued out payments to go to businesses, we saw by and large the money going to massive corporations such as Ruth Chris Steakhouse, instead of the small businesses. Why did that happen? I don't understand it. If we were going to take the tax dollars and make sure that they were going to be used for small businesses, that's where they should have went in the first place. Additionally, we saw the Democratic Party throwing things on there that we had no business putting on there, such as Planned Parenthood, right? What the heck is Planned Parenthood and paying for more abortions, making more abortions available throughout the entire country have to do with bailing out our small businesses that are being forced to be shut down by tyrannical governors that are operating under the guise of the DNC, under the guise of a biological tech? I would have made sure that didn't happen. I would have fought to make sure that the only thing going in there for these taxpayer dollars would have been funds that were used for small businesses that were being forced to shut down. Everybody else had insurance. They would have been covered for it.
Okay, thank you. And Paul Young.
John, similar to your first question where you talked about how we might have done things different, I'm also going to say I kind of hate to second guess, but I'll say in real time, I was supportive of some of the first pieces of legislation that Congress came out with, including the Paycheck Protection Program, which I think is absolutely, as Alan points out, has had some people that took advantage of it. And I salute, the leadership in the Trump administration that called out some of those abusive applicants, if you will, and got some of those grant monies back. But I think most media coverage, most kind of informed decision makers who look at that program and say, you know what, it largely had the effect that we wanted it to have. We wanted to try to save businesses. We wanted to design a program that would encourage those businesses to retain those employees. So of course, there were flaws. We need to look at those. We should try to get back some of the money where there were flaws. But I think that was a decent initial response. But just like I was saying in that first response, we also need to start to look forward. And fundamentally, of course, coronavirus is a health problem. And until people have confidence that they either can't get the disease or that they can be treated for it, there's always going to be difficulties and problems. And so I think the federal government leadership that we've seen, and if I were in Congress, I would continue to pursue that we need to find treatments for this coronavirus and a vaccine for the coronavirus. And I've seen good leadership, I think, in the Trump administration on both of those fronts. So I would have another part to the answer, but I know I'm running out of time. So we need to treat it as a health thing so people have confidence to go and engage in the economy.
Okay. We'll move on to our fourth question. Michigan's minimum wage is currently $9.65 an hour. That equates to about $20,000 a year. The federal minimum wage is $7.65. Would you support raising the federal minimum wage, and why or why not? First one will be Alan Hoover.
Okay, as a free and capitalistic environment, as a free and capitalistic country, I do not believe as the government regulate anything when it comes to business as far as what you're going to pay into it and what you're going to charge for your prices and what you're going to pay your employees. Look, we have microeconomics, and microeconomics has proven that in a capitalistic industry, the workers, the environment, the wholesalers, the manufacturers, and those that are purchasing the items, they will set the standards. So if there's a company that's charging too much money or not paying their people enough or paying their people too little, then that manufacturing company is going to go out of business, or there's nobody that's going to work there. So I believe in letting the economy regulate itself. I do not believe in the government regulating our economy. So when it comes to setting prices for wages, I believe that should be left up to the consumers and the industry, and not for the government. As we see that every time the government gets their hands in something, it gets messed up. Case in point, Obamacare.
Okay, thank you. Paul Young.
John, I have to say I'm skeptical of a lot of those types of measures. I think almost every reasonable study by economists indicate that when you force wages above what the market level is, you, of course, start to drive people out of jobs. We've had examples of that in lots of cities across this country. I think I'm remembering one in Seattle. I think I remember the same thing in San Francisco. And as soon as you force rates high, you start to drive people out of their jobs. And it should be pointed out, too, that typically has the highest impact on people that are the most vulnerable. People that need a job, and then they get pushed out of that job because now it's just not economical for the employer to continue to afford them. And so that affects young people, that affects people with lower skills. And those are exactly the type of people that the government should not be implementing policies to penalize them and to hurt them and to make their lives more difficult. So in a vibrant economy where we are growing, where we are increasing employment opportunities, wages will rise. And that's exactly what we saw before this coronavirus hit us. We saw record low unemployment in all specters of the economy. And a result was we were seeing wages increase, and we were seeing those wage increases, especially at the lower end of the scale. So creating incentives for freedom that allows economic growth, that's the way to help people at the lower end of the economic scale, not government mandates.
Okay. Christina Lake.
Thank you. I would agree. Well, first of all, the free market, I believe in the free market, and we need to make sure that we allow the free market to continue to work. And so if the better our economy does, the more money people are going to make. The better our economy does, the better off people are in America. Now, I also would like to piggyback on your last question that we talked about as to the coronavirus. I think there's one thing that we could have done too differently is we needed to make sure that we took care of actually, I'll just keep with the free market I'm sorry. I'll go back to that later on. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm done.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next question. Since January, about 121,000 Americans and about 6,100 Michiganders have died from the COVID-19 virus. Adequate testing and contact tracing for the virus have not yet been achieved. What healthcare and public health strategies are necessary to protect the health of all Michiganders, especially if there is another wave of COVID cases in Michigan? And Paul Young, you'll go first.
Well, thank you for that question, John. I think I've already addressed some of that, I think, when I said that even when it comes to the opening of the economy, fundamentally, it is a health concern. And, look, a lot of the practices that I think Americans are adopting voluntarily, that the Trump administration urged people back in late March and early April, and that I think most state governments have also adopted, the idea of social distancing, a phrase that probably none of us had heard 4 months ago, but we're all now practicing. I go for a walk in the morning, and if I see somebody, we almost automatically give ourselves a little bit of a wide berth. People are adopting those practices, whether it's mandatory or not. When I'm out shopping, I put a mask on in the grocery store, and you see most people complying with that. So I think, especially if we don't want mandates from the government, it's important that we do, those of us that can, especially voluntarily take on steps to protect ourselves and protect others, washing hands, all the rest of it. And of course, as I've already said, the aggressive pursuit of a vaccine and of treatments. And just celebrate what so many Americans have already done to make masks, and the companies that made the ventilators and all the rest of that. And when we look though at deaths, I think we're learning things. It's becoming clear that the practice of sending infected seniors back to nursing homes was a disastrous policy. And so one thing I would absolutely say is to Governor Whitmer and any other governor, let's learn from our mistakes and not repeat that problem going forward.
Okay. Next up, Christina Like.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to piggyback on the infected diseases that we did have. If we allow we're allowing the COVID patients to be in the elderly homes, the assisted living homes. That was completely wrong what our governors did. And not all governors did that, but our governor here in Michigan allowed it, and so did the New York governor. Now, with that being said, that's basically attempted murder, or that's gross negligence. And we need to make sure that we do something about that in Congress, because we cannot allow that to happen any longer, especially when we're telling these elderly people to stay in their houses and stay away from people. We need to protect them a lot more effectively and efficiently. And that was not done by the governor. Frankly, that very much upset me. The second thing is that we need to, I'm going to talk a little bit more about China. And if we go and not have manufacturing of the drugs there, we can actually bring the jobs back here to Michigan and allow the drug manufacturing to be continued right here in Michigan, because Michigan has the resources, the natural resources. In fact, Michigan State University is very helpful in those resources. The second thing is we can't have the health care for all. That's going to cost $23 trillion. And we keep hearing about it all the time. And that's going to cost $23 trillion to taxpayers. Who's going to pay this? You or I? We need to let the free markets work.
Okay. And Alan Hoover.
Look, you as an American citizen have a fundamental right to freedom. And for the government to shut us down, to lock you in your home, to force you to wear a face mask or gloves, to press upon you any of this stuff against your will is a clear-cut violation of your constitutional rights, a clear-cut violation of your God-given freedoms. Look, I would rather die standing than live on my knees. For our government to force upon us regulations where we have to don and clear surgical-grade masks, mind you, little pieces of cloth, or putting a shirt over our face, or putting a latex glove on our hands so that we can't interact with other people, that is an overreach of powers. Look, people die. We are not immortal as people. We are born and we die. Everybody dies eventually from something. So every time there's a flu or there's a new virus or a new bacteria infection that comes out, like we see every year with flu season, are we going to don and pepper everybody with face masks and face shields and rubber gloves pull our kids out of school, sacrifice their education, shut our economy down, not let people go to work, rack up endless amounts of debt? Is that what we're going to do? Absolutely not. Look, we are a free American society. It is not the government's right to do that. Our government's responsibility is to keep our borders secure and our country safe from foreign invaders. I'm an American citizen. I am a husband and a father. I can decide what my family needs to do with their everyday functions, as can my wife, as can my children. I do not need the government to force upon me masks and gloves and whatever else it is that they concoct in the back of their office.
Time is expired. Your time is expired. Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on to our next question. What do you think are the biggest challenges and or top priorities facing the 8th District, and how would you address them? And Christina Like, you'll go first.
Thank you. I believe the top things are jobs. We need to have our economy. A lot of people lost their jobs here because of this whole COVID virus. We've had small businesses being shut down. We've had individuals losing or being on unemployment. So our unemployment has skyrocketed. So we need to bring back jobs back to Michigan. That's first. So jobs back to Michigan. And how we're going to do that, one of my many causes, and I know I said this a couple times with the China and the drug manufacturing, we can bring that back to Michigan because we have the natural resources. It's going to save American lives, so we don't have China actually going and producing those drugs and manufacturing them, but we also will have Americans making those drugs, and we will have jobs right here in Michigan. The second thing is our constitutional rights. We're seeing every day that our constitutional rights are being under attack. Look, I've defended our constitutional rights for the last 15 years as an attorney, and I will continue to do so as your Congresswoman. We have seen our First Amendment attacked during this crisis. We've seen our Second Amendment attacked. We've seen our First Amendment through Facebook and Twitter. We also seen our Second Amendment. Governors were shutting down gun stores, and that's your Second Amendment right. That's not going to happen as your Congresswoman. We need to make sure that we are vigilant and we defend our constitutional rights.
Okay.
I didn't get to the third one.
Next, Mr. Hoover.
Look, I think the most important issues in the 8th District are the same issues that we see in other parts of our country, and predominantly the majority of our country. Healthcare. We need to undo the wrongs that were put into place by the other and previous administrations. Why is our government involved in health at all? At all. We need to take away any version and any traces left of Obamacare. We need to open up all the restrictions on the healthcare industry. Okay? Just like if you purchase a car here in the state of Michigan, if you buy yourself a Ford or a Dodge truck or a GM truck, you can drive that truck anywhere in the United States. But yet you can't purchase medical insurance from other states. Look, we need to make our medical insurance work for us, the consumer, by cutting all of these regulations so that it opens up, so that if there's a company in New York or a company in Florida or a company in Michigan that has the best policies, and the consumers get to choose. That is a huge, massive piece. Next thing is jobs. By being competitive in the market. Just like we saw with the USMCA Act. Okay, that's great. Now we need to start bringing these manufacturing facilities into place. And we need to make sure that no governor ever shuts down our manufacturing facilities or any of our jobs here in the state again. And that's why we have petitions that I've been helping to circulate to make sure that our governor is no longer, regardless of who the governor is, never shuts our economy down again. Jobs and medical. We need to make sure that our medical insurance is competitive and not in control by the government.
Okay, thank you. And Paul Young.
John, your question was what are the challenges and priorities that are the most important in the 8th District? And as I've campaigned in Ingham County, in Livingston County, in Oakland County, I can share with you what voters are sharing with me. And I'll list those three and then try to get through them if I can in my remaining probably 75 seconds. Jobs and the economy, trade and immigration policy second, and third, I would say healthcare, to include making sure we protect people with pre-existing conditions, prescription drug prices, and many others. So to go back to the top one, jobs and economy. As I said earlier in this program tonight, we had record low unemployment. We had wages rising across the spectrum, particularly at the low end of the wage scale. And with the government shutdowns that were done in response to the coronavirus, that's all been put in peril. We see, as you've mentioned in an earlier question, record high unemployment. We see business failures. We see people whose livelihoods are very much threatened by that understandable government policy. And we need to, as quickly as we and as safely as we can, let people get back to their free interactions with each other in the economy. And I think I can't get into a lot of details again with the time limit, but we need to focus on that as a top priority. Related to that, though, of course, is trade policy and immigration policy. I salute the Trump administration that's limiting foreign workers coming in at times of record high unemployment. We need to put Americans first. We need to stand up to China. We need to continue to have good trade policy. And again, I see that stop sign is about to come up. I can't even get to the third one, which is healthcare.
That's okay. And our final question for the evening. List 3 experiences you have had that make you the most qualified candidate to represent the 8th District. Alan Hoover, you'll go first.
Number 1, I already have 20 years of public service. 20 years of service in the United States Marine Corps. The few, the proud, and the brave. Deployed 5 times, 19 operations, experienced multiple cultures, multiple countries around the globe. That experience is not something you can learn in a classroom. It is not something that you can read in a book. Serving my country in the Marine Corps, fighting for our freedom in the same capacity that the founding fathers fought against England for the freedom of our country. That is not an experience that you can learn. That is an experience that you have to experience. That is number 1, and I think that is the most important. Number 2, being without. I grew up in a very humble beginning. Single mother, 2 younger sisters, 16 different cities across the state of Michigan. Very poor family. I know what it's like not to have anything. And I also know what it's like to work hard and end up working so hard that you have a successful life. I have a beautiful family, $300,000 house. I got an acre of property out in the country. Came from nothing. That experience right there. The American dream is real. I experienced it. Number 3, my own business, a successful business. I've set up multiple businesses, and I know what it's like to create something from nothing and have a successful business. That right there also proves that the American dream is real. I think that those 3 experiences are things that you can't learn in a classroom, things you can't read in a book. And I think that those 3 experiences are vital in public service.
All right. Next up is Paul Young.
John, I'm going to start with my experience in my family business. Alan talked about living the American dream, and my parents, who grew up in Jackson, Michigan, certainly in a lower middle class background, they've lived that American dream. My dad built a company maintaining military family housing, and I got the great pleasure and opportunity to work in that business. And so I've been to bases all across the country, fixing, repairing, maintaining the homes of our military families. And in doing that, I had to meet a payroll. I had to meet schedules. I had to make sure that when a family was moving from one base to another and they needed that home to be ready, I was working with our work crews to make sure that got done. And so I think having that experience as a business person and as someone who's had those kind of responsibilities will help me as a legislator in Congress, thinking about the impact of any law, any regulation, how it would affect business and the ability to employ people and serve the American people. Particularly in these times, I think my experience as a former prosecutor, I worked in a domestic violence unit where we protected abused women and battered children. And as we think about any police reform, which, interestingly enough, today in the U.S. Senate, Republicans try to bring a bill to the floor and the Democrats refuse to have that bill. So I think my experience as a prosecutor will be helpful in that. And then finally, I have worked as a Senate staffer. I've worked in the Trump administration. So if the voters send me to Washington, D.C., I'll be more prepared than perhaps other candidates to assume those responsibilities.
All right. Thank you. And Christina Lake.
Thank you. The first experience that I had is I've gone to church my entire life. My mom taught me the importance of my faith, and my father taught me the Second Amendment. So that experience living with 2 loving parents who taught me my morals and integrity, I will be honest. And when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do something. And that means when I'm going to serve this district and be your congresswoman and do whatever is in the best interest of this district, I will do that. The second experience is I'm a lawyer. I draft orders all the time. I make sure that I do the best job I can to make sure that nobody can get out of that order. That's the same thing I will do with legislation. The other thing is that I have served this community as a lawyer by protecting protecting veterans by serving them with pro bono cases, also domestic violence victims, helping them get back on their feet. I've also served the community by being a mediator, and being a mediator is something that when you have two sides that are conflicting, and we have that in Congress all the time, you need to find that common ground. And now, don't get me wrong, I'm a fighter as a lawyer, but as a mediator, you have to have that negotiation skill and find that common ground so that you can actually work with the other side to make sure legislation is passed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. It's now time for our closing statements, and we'll begin with Alan Hoover.
First of all, Christina, Paul, it's great seeing you guys out here. Yourselves and myself, we care about women voters. As far as Detmer, I mean, we'll let the actions speak for themselves. With that being stated, we are living in a time where our children are being attacked psychologically and with technology to the point to where we see teenagers and young adults ripping down the statues that represent the wars that represents the bloodshed that was spilled for our country, our young country, our country of 245 years to become what it was. Look, America may not be perfect, but America is definitely the shining hill, the shining city on the top of the hill. And for the youth to be ripping down our statues, for the young adults to be ripping down our statues, for our country to be the only country on this planet that has a constitution, a bill of rights where people have the same powers as kings and queens because they are truly fundamentally free. And to see them take to the streets and say that our country is a sham, that our police officers do not care about us as citizens, that our government does not care about us as citizens, that our rights have been taken away from us, to see them screaming and echoing that in the streets and ripping down our statues, desecrating figures from the past, memorialize the sacrifices that were made by our country. That is an absolute shame. We have to make a change.
Time has expired, and we will move on to Paul Young.
Now I'm going to pick up on what I heard from Alan, and this was on my mind even before he said it. I want to salute Alan Hoover and Christina alike for being here tonight. When I'm active and out campaigning, I'm often seeing both Alan and Christina, and I appreciate the positive message, the great energy, and as a first-time candidate myself, you know, I realize even more that the sacrifice, and you really do put yourself out there, and I salute both of them for their efforts because I see it every day. And it's an honor to be campaigning with them. I guess I'll conclude by saying, look, I'm a Michigan native. And John, to your previous question, I've worked in my family business. I'm a former prosecutor. I worked in the Trump administration. And I think all those experiences helped prepare me to be someone who can serve the people of the 8th District. And I think, as I've campaigned across this district, what I'm hearing from voters is that they felt that last go-round they were offered a promise that there would be an effort at bipartisanship, that there would be an effort, that there wouldn't be a pursuit of impeachment, that there would be a focus on the values of the 8th District. And what I'm hearing all the time is they are greatly disappointed with the representation they're getting, and they absolutely want to see a change. So I'll just conclude by saying, as I did at the opening, if you want more information, my website is my name, PAULJUNGE.com, and check out my Facebook page at Paul Young for Congress. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And finally, Christina Like.
Thank you. It's nice to see you both too as well. Now I want to go to Congress to fight for you. Why? Because I have a passion for this country. I love this country. I love our state. I grew up in this state. I know the people. Some of them are colleagues of mine. Some of them are friends of mine. Some of them are just people that I've met on the street just campaigning. But I know most of these people. I know the businesses. I know this district well. Our constitutional rights, this is our home. Our constitutional rights are under attack by the radical left. And law and order is being pushed aside for anarchy. Our current representative, Alyssa Slacken, is too obsessed with her hatred for the president and not effectively representing our district. She pretends to be a moderate, yet she votes with Nancy Pelosi 100% of the time. Now, Slacken even offered passive justifications for the violence, rioting, and looting we have seen in the streets. I'm just sick and tired of the attempts to tear down this country and chip away our freedoms. Instead, I want to put America first. And I want to stand up for your Second Amendment. I want to stand up for the unborn. I want to support the border security. And I want to make sure that we fight for common sense solutions to our most obvious challenges, such as infrastructure, healthcare, and the administration of fair and equal justice.
Okay. Well, thank you to all three of our candidates. And I will now turn over over to Ellen Lafferty from the League of Women Voters for closing remarks.
Okay, thank you, everyone. The League thanks the candidates for participating in tonight's forum and to those who contributed questions. For the technology assistance provided by Glenn Fisher and Heartland Crow-Main Library. And finally, to our partners at WHMI and the Livingston Post for making this program possible. All of our forums will be available for viewing on our League's Facebook and webpage. You can also go to vote411.org, which is the League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and current proposals that will appear on your ballot, and to view tonight's candidates' forums. WHMI and the Livingston Post will be sharing these forums on their platforms as well. The League reserves the right to publicize the forum and may, at their option, invite the media or some other entity not associated with any of the candidates or campaigns to provide televised, radio, or other coverage of the forum. Copyright ownership of the tapes or transcripts resides with the League. The candidates and their supporters will not use the forum, portions of the forum, or any audio clips, video clips, or transcripts for political advertising or other purposes without written permission from the League of Women Voters. With passing of Proposal 3 in 2018, all voters are eligible to cast absentee ballots. In addition, while voters are encouraged to register ahead of time, Michigan law now provides same-day voter registration by going to your local clerk's office. Just remember, no matter how you do it, be sure to vote in the August 4th primary election. Thank you, everyone, and good night.